is the global movement history. Petronila Infantes starts out as a trade unionist in a syndicate, a trade union in Bolivia in the early 1930s as a young woman. She's an indigenous Bolivian woman. She remains the main labor leader in Bolivia right into the 1950s. Okay, I think this is very significant. You can look at somebody like Luisa Capetillo in Puerto Rico, who again shocks bourgeois sensibility by kind of wearing the pants and leading the trade union movement in the early 1910s. You can look at somebody like Juana Belén Gutiérrez de Mendoza in Mexico, an incredible woman who runs a newspaper, who runs this radical feminist newspaper for 36 years, often from behind bars. I don't know how she did it. I don't know how she, I mean, I battle as a journalist to meet regular deadlines without being jailed. She somehow managed 6 years, often from her jail cell. Juana Rocco Belém and Virginia Bolton of Argentina and of Uruguay, respectively. Incredibly strong woman who established the first essentially one of the first feminist journals in the world in Argentina. Got quite a lot of flack from the male anarchists saying, "Oh, you're hiving off, you're doing your own thing, you're dividing the movement, etc." But it was a necessary voice, and that was the name of the journal, La Voz de la Mujer. Okay, the voice of the woman. Maria Lacerda de Moura, the primary libertarian educator in Brazil, who toured right across Latin America. We can go further abroad. We can look at anarchist women as guerrilla fighters. We can look at Marusha Nikiforova in the Ukrainian Revolution, who essentially headed up this black detachment of anarchist troops and who fought against the white armies on the steppes of the eastern Ukraine. Eventually executed at Sevastopol for her activities in about 1919. We can look at He Zhen in China, leading very militant women's fight in China for women to be treated as essentially equal comrades to males in the fight against oppression and against the terrible patriarchy and really stultifying tradition, those suffocating traditions that prevailed in China. The examples are endless. The examples really are endless. One of the other key aspects of this anarchist education and agitation and organization around the world is that the anarchists comprehensively broke through the race barrier. There is this really silly and outdated notion of anarchism as some sort of rather pale, Western European kind of thing. What our book, especially the second volume, we hope comprehensively demonstrates is that, the first volume being the theoretical volume, we look at leading anarchist theorists from around the world. We break out of, to call the standard history of anarchism, to call it Eurocentric is actually insulting to the people from Eastern Europe, to the mass anarchist movements of Eastern Europe that are completely ignored by the standard histories. Okay? Excuse me, people, you're being incredibly rude. I'm just going to be authoritarian on that, Could you just keep it down a little bit?
I thought this was anarchistic.
It's not nihilistic, it's anarchistic. There's a huge difference. Anarchism involves respect, mutual respect. Please. Okay. the breakthrough across lines of race was, it came about, we think, primarily because in this great period of upheaval of the late 19th century, a lot of the processes that are in play today are quite similar to what what they were experiencing then. I mean, we're in a very different world now. You know, we've got nanotechnology and all sorts of bizarre things. You know, space tourism and all sorts of really dramatic ways of engaging with the world with our iPods and our Blackberries and all this kind of thing that are very different to the guys who were riding around in horse and cart 100, 150 years ago. And yet a lot of the processes that we're going through now are quite similar. In what is usually called the short 20th century, which is essentially the First World War till the collapse of the Berlin Wall, a lot of states essentially really locked down their populations. Population flows around the world really slowed down quite dramatically. About 100, 150 years ago, there was this massive movement of workers around the world. And since the fall of the Berlin Wall, we started to see that kind of stuff freed up again. We have this huge movement of actual physical people, of labor moving around the world. People, you know, I've run in, you know, I go to, you know, I was in Sudan, I meet a guy from Bangladesh, you know. People are moving around all over the place. I'm in Jordan, and there's Ukrainians there working there. I mean, the world is very, very mixed now. It's a lot more freed up than it has been than it was for most of the 20th century, right? It's really a dramatic change. And it echoes those huge flows of migrant labor of 100 years ago. At the same time, now as then, there's all sorts of military adventurism going on in Central Asia and the Middle East. There's all sorts of warmongering and imperialism. The response of a lot of working people who are increasingly excluded. You know, during that state period, perhaps a lot of people had, you know, they had maybe a bit of welfare, they had a pension, they had some sort of protections. A lot of those protections that we fought for, that we built up over the years, have in fact been eroded. So a lot of the way in which we work, a lot of the way in which we live, is kind of back to the way it was 100 years ago. How are workers responding to this? They're responding to it in ways, you know, they're trying to deal with their pain. They're saying, look, we're really battling here. We don't understand what's happening to us. We're feeling the pain. We don't necessarily know where it's coming from, but we certainly know the pain when we feel it. Some people are turning to all sorts of religious cults, to religious extremism and terrorism. Some people are trying to rediscover a radical tradition, saying, well, how do we rediscover our sense of real democracy? How do we fight back? And the anarchist movement